The phone rang at 2:37 a.m., shattering the silence of Brian's suburban Boston home like a gunshot. He fumbled for it, heart pounding, only to hear his estranged father's voice crack over the line. "Your brother, Ethan, he's gone. Car accident on I-95. Brian dropped the receiver, the world tilting as memories flooded back. Years of mockery, the final brutal argument where he'd called Ethan a disgrace, and the door slammed shut forever, now reopened by death's cruel hand. Brian stared at the ceiling, his wife Sarah stirring beside him. "Who was that?" she murmured, but he couldn't speak. Ethan, his identical twin, the one he'd shared a womb with, a childhood in the tight-knit Irish Catholic neighborhood of Southie, was dead at 32. They'd been inseparable until college, when Ethan came out as gay. Brian, steeped in the family's rigid expectations, had laughed it off at first, then turned vicious. "You're choosing this? Over us?" He'd spat during that last fight 5 years ago, right after Ethan announced his engagement to Marcus. Brian had cut him out, ignored calls, blocked numbers, convinced it was tough love to fix him. Now, Ethan's life was over, and Brian felt a hollow ache where regret should be. Morning came too soon. Sarah brewed coffee, her eyes searching his face. "You have to go to the funeral," she said softly. Brian nodded, but inside, turmoil brewed. He hadn't spoken to Ethan since that blowout at their parents' house. Their mother, Maureen, had begged him to reconcile, but Brian held firm, parroting the church's stance on sinful lifestyles. Ethan had moved to New York, built a life with Marcus, and even adopted a son, little Jamie, now 4 years old. Brian had seen pictures on social media before blocking that too. A happy family, one he'd dismissed as unnatural. The drive to New York felt endless. Traffic on the Merritt Parkway mirrored his racing thoughts. What if he'd reached out? Ethan's death notice in the Times mentioned a loving husband and devoted father. Brian gripped the wheel tighter. At the funeral home, the air was thick with grief. Marcus stood by the casket, hollow-eyed, holding Jamie's tiny hand. The boy looked just like them, curly brown hair, green eyes. Twins genes, Brian thought bitterly. Maureen enveloped Brian in a hug, tears streaming. "He asked about you even at the end," she whispered. Their father, Patrick, stood stoic, but his hands trembled. The service was simple, no Catholic rites. Ethan had left the church long ago. Friends shared stories. Ethan's work as a graphic designer, his advocacy for LGBTQ rights, the joy Jamie brought. Brian sat in the back, invisible until Marcus spotted him. Their eyes met, a flash of recognition turning to ice. Afterward, in the reception hall, Brian approached Marcus hesitantly. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. Marcus's face hardened. "Sorry? You abandoned him when he needed you most." Jamie tugged at Marcus's sleeve, oblivious. Brian knelt down. "Hey, buddy. I'm your Uncle Brian." The boy shyly smiled, and something cracked inside Brian. That night, back in his hotel, he couldn't sleep. Ethan's will, Marcus had mentioned it briefly. What would become of Jamie? Marcus was the legal parent, but Ethan had been the biological link through surrogacy. Doubts crept in. Was Marcus fit? A gay man raising a boy alone? Brian shook his head, ashamed of the thought, but it lingered. The next day, Brian met with the lawyer. Ethan had left everything to Marcus, but with a clause. If Marcus couldn't care for Jamie, guardianship would go to family. Marcus was struggling, grief-stricken, job unstable after Ethan's death. Brian saw an opening, a twisted redemption. "I want to help," he told Marcus over coffee. "Let me take Jamie back to Boston." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You? The one who called us freaks." But Brian persisted, his voice steady. "He's blood. My blood." Arguments escalated. Marcus accused Brian of homophobia, of wanting to straighten Jamie out. Brian denied it, but deep down, fear gnawed. What if Jamie turned out like Ethan? Society's whispers, the church's judgment. Yet, seeing Jamie play in the park, innocent and full of life, Brian felt a pull. This was his chance to atone, or was it control? Family pressure mounted. Maureen urged reconciliation. Patrick remained silent, haunted by his own regrets. Brian returned home conflicted. Sarah supported him, but warned, "This isn't about fixing the past. It's about the future." Nights blurred into debates with himself. Ethan's death replayed. A drunk driver, instant. If Brian had been there, maybe. No, he had to act. He called Marcus. "Please, let me raise him." The line went dead. The battle had begun. Weeks turned into a blur of legal wrangling. Brian hired a lawyer in New York, citing family ties and stability. "I'm married, steady job in finance, good schools in Boston," he argued. Marcus fought back, his attorney painting Brian as the bigoted brother who'd disowned Ethan. Court documents flew. Affidavits from friends detailing Brian's past rants. Emails where he'd mocked Ethan's lifestyle choice. Brian winced reading them. Memories of college parties where he joked about Ethan's phase. Earning laughs from frat brothers. Back in Boston, the strain showed. Sarah noticed Brian's distraction, his late nights poring over old photos. "Why now?" she asked one evening, as they sat on the porch overlooking their manicured lawn. "Because I failed him," Brian admitted, voice breaking. "I let Dad's prejudices become mine. Ethan was brave. I was a coward." Sarah held his hand, but doubt flickered in her eyes. Their marriage, childless after years of trying, added another layer. Jamie could fill that void, but at what cost? Maureen visited, her face lined with worry. "Patrick's not sleeping," she confided. "He blames himself for pushing you boys apart." Flashbacks hit Brian. Sunday masses where the priest condemned unnatural acts. Patrick's stern lectures on manhood. Ethan had rebelled quietly, coming out at 20 during a family dinner that ended in shouts. Brian, fearing the fallout, sided with their parents. "It's wrong," he'd said, echoing the doctrine. Ethan left that night, and the rift widened. In court, the judge, a stern woman in her 50s, listened impassively. Marcus testified first, voice steady. "Ethan and I built a home free from judgment. Brian wants to drag Jamie into the world that rejected his father." Brian's turn came. He spoke of regret, of wanting to honor Ethan's memory. "I was wrong," he said, tears welling. "Let me make it right." The gallery murmured. LGBTQ advocates protested outside. Signs reading, "Blood doesn't excuse bigotry." Post-hearing, Brian confronted Marcus in the hallway. "This isn't about me versus you. It's about Jamie's future." Marcus's eyes flashed. "You think you're better? Stable? Your stability is built on denial." They parted angrily, but Brian saw the exhaustion in Marcus's posture. Grief was eroding him. Bills piled up, Ethan's insurance delayed. At home, Brian dove into research books on grief, LGBTQ parenting. He attended a support group anonymously, hearing stories of rejection and reconciliation. One man shared losing his brother to suicide after coming out. The guilt mirrored Brian's. "You can't undo the past," the man said. "But you can choose differently now." Brian nodded, but choices loomed. Drop the suit or push on. Family dinner at his parents' brought more tension. Patrick, usually gruff, broke down. "I drove him away," he sobbed. "Told him to pray it away." Maureen comforted him, but Brian felt the weight. "If I get Jamie, will you accept him as he is?" he asked. Patrick hesitated, then nodded. Progress, fragile. Marcus called unexpectedly. "Jamie's asking about his daddy. And you." They met in Central Park, Jamie between them. The boy chattered about preschool, oblivious to the undercurrents. Brian played catch, laughing for the first time in months. Marcus watched warily. "Ethan would want Jamie happy," he said softly. "But can you promise no judgment if he's like us?" Brian swallowed. "I'll try." The promise hung heavy. Back in Boston, Sarah revealed her own secret. She'd been in therapy, dealing with infertility grief. "This fight, it's consuming you. Us." Brian pulled her close, vowing change. But doubts persisted. Was he fighting for Jamie, or to erase his guilt? Society's gaze intensified. News articles dubbed it the twin custody battle, fueling online debates. Brian scrolled comments. Supporters called him redeemed. Critics labeled him opportunistic. Pivotal moment came during mediation. The mediator probed, "Why now, Brian?" He confessed everything, the mockery, the cut ties, the internalized hate. Marcus listened, tears silent. "I loved Ethan," Marcus said. "You broke his heart." Brian nodded. "I know. I'm sorry." For the first time, vulnerability bridged the gap. But the session ended unresolved, tension thicker. As winter set in, Brian reflected on Ethan's life. He visited Ethan's old apartment, now empty. Photos showed joy, weddings, pride parades, Jamie's birth. Brian pocketed a picture, a reminder. The fight wasn't just legal, it was moral. What price redemption? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the hearing resumed. Brian sat rigid, his lawyer whispering strategies. Marcus looked gaunt, Jamie absent, deemed too young for the drama. The judge reviewed new evidence. Brian's therapy sessions, letters from colleagues attesting to his character shift. But Marcus's side countered with old voicemails. Brian's voice, slurred from a bar, ranting about fairy tales after Ethan's engagement announcement. Testimonies poured in. A childhood friend recounted the twins' bond. They were like one person until Ethan came out. Brian changed overnight. Maureen's statement was tearful. "I want my grandson home, but not at the cost of more pain." Patrick refused to testify, his silence deafening. Brian's mind raced. Had he inherited his father's stubbornness? Outside, protesters chanted. Media vans parked. Brian avoided cameras, but one reporter cornered him. "Is this atonement or appropriation?" He walked away, question echoing. At lunch, Sarah joined him. "You're doing this for the right reasons," she assured. But was he? Nightmares plagued him. Ethan accusing, "You stole my son." Discovery revealed Ethan's journal. Subpoenaed. Entries gutted Brian. Brian hates what he fears in himself. Pray he finds peace. Ethan had suspected Brian's own repressed feelings. Brian dismissed it, but seeds of doubt sprouted. In college, fleeting attractions brushed aside, buried under machismo. Marcus's vulnerability surfaced in cross-examination. "I'm drowning," he admitted. "But Jamie needs love, not conversion therapy." Brian's lawyer pounced. "My client has evolved." The judge adjourned, decision pending. In the interim, Brian volunteered at an LGBTQ center, awkward at first, then enlightening. Stories of familial rejection mirrored his actions. "Change is possible," a counselor said. "But it hurts." Family dynamics shifted. Patrick called. "I was wrong about Ethan. Don't repeat my mistakes." They talked for hours, unearthing buried emotions. Maureen organized a memorial, inviting Marcus. He came, Jamie in tow. At the park, old wounds aired. "You mocked us at our wedding," Marcus said. Brian apologized sincerely. "I was scared, ignorant." Jamie's laughter lightened the air, a bridge forming. But betrayal loomed. Brian's lawyer uncovered Marcus's past. A brief drug issue in youth, expunged but dredged up. Brian hesitated using it, but desperation won. In court, it surfaced, Marcus furious. "This is low, even for you." Brian regretted instantly, the moral line crossed. The judge frowned, noting the tactic. Post-session, Marcus confronted Brian privately. "Ethan believed in you. Don't prove him wrong." They shared a drink, reminiscing. Ethan the artist, Brian the analyst, opposites yet twins. "He wanted kids so bad," Marcus said. "Surrogacy was our dream." Brian learned details. Ethan the donor, Marcus the nurturer. Jamie was Ethan's legacy. Internal conflict peaked. Brian confided in Sarah. "Am I straight-washing his life?" She urged reflection. In therapy, he explored biases, societal pressures, church indoctrination. "Coming out to yourself is hard," the therapist noted. Brian balked, but questions lingered. Those college crushes, the envy of Ethan's freedom. The ruling approached. Brian dreamed of Ethan, Choose love, bro. Waking. He called his lawyer. Drop the dirt on Marcus. Too late. Tension mounted. At the final hearing, experts testified on Jamie's best interest. A psychologist warned, uprooting him from Marcus could traumatize. Brian saw the truth. Jamie thrived with Marcus. In closing, Brian stood. I withdraw my petition. Gasps echoed. Marcus is Jamie's dad. I want to be uncle if allowed. The judge nodded. Case dismissed. Marcus approached, stunned. Why? Brian replied. Because Ethan would want unity, not division. They hugged awkwardly. A start. Healing began slowly. Brian visited New York weekends, bonding with Jamie. Stories of Ethan flowed, laughter mixing with tears. Society's judgment faded. Personal growth mattered. But scars remained. Lost years, unspoken words. Brian pondered. Had he truly changed? Or was it circumstance? Reconciliation wasn't linear. Brian's withdrawal from the custody battle earned cautious trust from Marcus, but old resentments simmered. First visits were supervised. Jamie shy around this new uncle. Brian brought toys, shared twin tales. Your dad and I once switched classes. Fooled everyone. Jamie giggled, ice-breaking. Back in Boston, Brian faced his own community. Church friends whispered. Some distanced. Supporting that lifestyle? One asked. Brian challenged. It's family. He left the parish, seeking inclusive spaces. Sarah joined, their bond strengthening through shared evolution. Maureen's health declined, stress from the ordeal. Brian moved her to Boston, Patrick following reluctantly. Family therapy sessions unearthed decades of dysfunction. Patrick admitted, I feared losing you boys to the world. Ethan had borne the brunt, his coming out a catalyst. I pushed him away, Patrick confessed. Brian echoed, and I followed. Marcus invited Brian to Jamie's birthday. In Brooklyn, balloons and cake masked undercurrents. Friends eyed Brian warily, but he engaged, listening to their stories. One couple shared adoption struggles amid anti-gay laws. Brian reflected on privilege, his straight-passing life versus Ethan's battles. A setback hit when Jamie asked, Why didn't you like Daddy? Brian froze. Marcus intervened gently. Later, alone, Brian explained age-appropriately, I was wrong about a lot, but I loved him. Jamie hugged him, forgiveness pure. Brian wept privately, the child's innocence a mirror to his failings. Professional life shifted. At his finance firm, Brian advocated for diversity training after overhearing slurs. Colleagues resisted, but he persisted, Ethan's advocacy inspiring. Change starts small, he told Sarah. She revealed pregnancy, miracle after years. Joy mixed with fear. How to raise a child free from his past biases. Tensions resurfaced during Pride Month. Marcus invited them to the parade. Brian hesitated, public display? But he went, Jamie on his shoulders, flags waving. Overwhelmed by joy and acceptance, Brian felt Ethan's presence. Patrick joined surprisingly, a rainbow pin on his lapel. For Ethan, he muttered. Betrayal's echo lingered. Marcus confided, That court dirt hurt. Brian apologized again. I was desperate. They discussed co-parenting informally, holidays shared, decisions joint. Jamie flourished, 2 homes of love. Internal awakening deepened. Brian explored his identity in therapy. Maybe I'm not as straight as I thought, he admitted to Sarah. She supported, Whoever you are, I love you. No labels yet, but freedom beckoned. Society's mouth won. Progress in laws, but backlash in politics. Brian voted accordingly, Ethan's memory guiding. A family trip to Cape Cod bonded them. Beach walks, stories shared. Jamie built sandcastles, symbolizing rebuilt foundations. But damage's price. Lost time with Ethan, Marcus's grief, Jamie's confusion. Brian pondered ethics. Was his initial fight selfish? Moral ambiguity haunted. As fall arrived, Brian wrote a letter to Ethan, buried at his grave. I see now. Forgive me. Peace elusive but growth evident. Conflicts resolved? Not fully. Life's messiness persisted. Choices, consequences eternal. Years passed, but wounds scarred over unevenly. Jamie, now 8, shuttled between New York and Boston seamlessly. Brian's daughter, Lily, born healthy, adored her big brother. Family gatherings normalized, Thanksgivings blended, no more divisions. Yet, societal pressures resurfaced. Jamie's school faced anti-LGBTQ curriculum bans in some states. Marcus worried. Brian, now on a nonprofit board for queer rights, lobbied. For Ethan, he said. Personal growth continued. Brian came out as bisexual publicly. A blog post viral. Backlash hit, old friends unfriended, but support poured in. Sarah stood firm. Proud of you. Patrick's transformation inspired. He volunteered at senior centers, sharing his story of regret. Don't wait till it's too late, he advised. Maureen passed peacefully. Her last words, love wins. The funeral united them, Ethan's absence palpable. A crisis tested bonds. Marcus faced health issues, cancer scare. Brian stepped up, caring for Jamie. Your family, he insisted. Marcus recovered, gratitude deepening ties. But reflections on betrayal. Brian's court tactics, once forgiven, occasionally stung in arguments. Jamie's teen years loomed, questions arising. Was Uncle Brian mean to Dad? He asked Marcus. Truth shared carefully, lessons in forgiveness. Brian discussed openly. I was wrong. Learn from it. Jamie explored his identity, fluid and unpressured. Professional betrayals echoed personal ones. Brian lost a promotion due to his advocacy. He quit, starting a consulting firm focused on inclusive finance. Success followed, purpose found. Moral dilemmas persisted. Had Brian's initial mockery contributed to Ethan's stress? The accident was random, but guilt lingered. Therapy helped. You can't control the past. Awakening fully, Brian marched in parades, mentored youth. Family expanded, Marcus remarried. A kind man named David. Brian welcomed him, no jealousy. Jamie thrived, artistic like Ethan. In quiet moments, Brian pondered the price. Damaged relationships, self-discovery's pain. But gains, authentic life, deeper connections. Society evolved slowly, but his world changed. Decades later, Brian sat on his porch, graying hair catching the Boston sunset. Jamie, now 25, visited with his partner, a young architect named Tyler. They held hands openly, a sight that once would have repelled Brian. Now it warmed him. Proud of you, he said, hugging Jamie. Marcus and David joined, the group laughing over old photos. Reflecting, Brian traced the journey. The shock of Ethan's death, the desperate bid for custody, the withdrawal that sparked healing. Choices debated. Was cutting ties a moral failure? The mockery, a betrayal of blood? Society's role, church norms excused nothing. Damages toll. Ethan's isolation, Marcus's pain, Jamie's early confusion. But food for thought. Redemption possible? Brian believed yes through action. Patrick, in his 80s, shared wisdom. I paid with regret, don't you? His death soon after unified them further. Brian wrote a memoir, Twin Shadows, sparking discussions on family, identity, prejudice. Reviews mixed. Some hailed transformation. Others questioned sincerity. He welcomed debate. As night fell, Brian whispered to Ethan's memory, I tried. Peace came in waves. Was Brian's quest for redemption truly selfless? Or did it stem from a need to absolve his own guilt at the expense of others' pain?